So we are ready to start. Before we start, a quick introduction about who am I. So my name is Aditya. I am the academics manager as well as the quant faculty at the Koramangala Center. I think some of you all would have seen me at the Koramangala Center. For those of you all who are online students, you would have at least spoken to me, connected with me over a phone call or mail, right? So I'm going to take up this webinar today, where basically I speak about what you need to do from the beginning to your end of preparation on the GMAT, right? So I'm going to take things in three phases, right? The first part of the session, a quick small bit, I'm going to speak about what how to create an effective study plan. The second bit I'm going to speak about is what resources to use and what not to use, and that's going to be the first bit. Okay, that's very quick. I don't need to spend too much time on it because I think most of you all who've taken up the course would have been given a study plan. I would just tell you, processes of how to tweak the study plan you've been given, right? And more importantly, I would focus on what material to use, because I think most of you all have that concern of what to do, which edition of the OG do I use, how do I work out the questions, how do I maintain an error log, all of that, right? The second bit of the webinar, and this is going to be a slightly phased out portion of the webinar, is where I actually get into how you need to, follow a review process. Now, many students, and this is something that I've always noticed, is always try to solve questions, get to an answer, check the correct answer, and then move on. Okay. So I'm going to give you a process of how to analyze questions from the OG, right? Or any other resource that you're working with. I'm going to tell you how to maintain and also later on how to use or analyze an error log, right? The first aspect of things is obviously creating the error log and maintaining the error log. What kind of data do you put into the error log? What kind of pointers do you put in, right? And then I'm going to also speak about two aspects here, how the data sufficiency aspect is very important on the quant front, because that's a completely new type of question which the GMAT tests you on. And also I'm going to speak about what it takes to develop your reading comprehension skills, okay? Because most students suffer a bit on reading comprehension, right? So that's going to be the entire agenda of this entire session. Okay, so I'm going to keep a 15-minute Q&A towards the end. So I give you some time to ask me questions. Try to keep it, more specific questions of sorts. Don't ask me generic questions like, what college do I apply to, or so on, right? If you're asking me, any GMAT related question, just make it a little specific so that I can, give you an answer in like a line or two. Before we start, I have a PPT right in front of me here. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I have a share screen option. Just let me know once my screen is viewable. Quickly type in the chat window if all of you all are able to view my screen, and we're going to take things forward from here. Perfect. Okay, so before we start, quickly, some ground rules to follow. See, we want to keep this session as organized as possible. So make sure that we stick to timelines. I have a timeline in my mind of 2 hours. I may extend the session to approximately 9:30, depending upon the questions that I get. So we'll try to keep it as organized as possible. Any responses you have or any questions or queries that you have, please make sure you type it in the chat window, the public chat window. Don't send it as a Q&A, because I want everybody else also to look at the question, because that student also might have the same question and I can resolve that at one go. So any question in the public chat window, and please make sure you ask me the question after I finished my explanation on certain things. Okay, I will try to make sure that my explanation encompasses all points so that all your doubts are clarified before you ask me certain questions. If there are still questions, then I would recommend that you put it on the chat window, right? And the last thing, if you're facing audio issues, you're not able to hear, just quickly log out and log in, because high chance there will be a problem from your end. If it's my end, I would definitely get to know. But just make sure you log out, log in, things should be fine. All right. Perfect. Yes, so somebody has already put in a query on the chat window. Every webinar that we have is recorded, and the recording of the webinar is uploaded on our YouTube channel. Okay, so our marketing team does a very good job on giving you access, right, to that webinar. So it's just all you have to do after 24 to 48 hours, go on to YouTube, check our Crackverbal channel. You'll find all the webinars uploaded there, right? So every webinar is recorded, even for people who are working professionals can view it. All right. So like I said, we have a total duration of 90 minutes. I'm planning to push it to around say 105 minutes or so and give you around 15 minutes of Q&A towards the end. So just keep yourself free until 9:30, right? For those of you who don't know too much about Crackverbal, quick introduction. We founded in 2006. We've served more than, I would say the numbers now is around 10,000 students in 37 different countries. In addition to classroom sessions and online sessions, we do also take on personal tutoring sessions. That's one-on-one sessions with faculty. And we've also, have the application services as a part of our entire course structure. Right. So any sort of doubts, any sort of queries on the application front, I would advise that you keep it out of this webinar, because I think you'll be assigned anyway for people who've enrolled for the Mission 2000 MBA course, 2019 MBA course. You'll be assigned an application mentor, and all your doubts can be clarified by him. Okay, so here's the first phase, right? I said I'm going to phase this out into 3 phases. The first phase is of getting started, right? Now, for those who are starting your prep, right? For those who are starting your prep, the first thing you have to do is get to know what kind of test you're up against. Okay, because the problem I see that most of the students just get up one day and say that, I just need to take an MBA, and for that I need a GMAT. They just come and enroll and they don't have any clue of what the test entails. So we have a very good 15-minute guide to the GMAT that you can find on our website. It's an ebook. You can download it, have a look at the entire structure of the test. Okay, I'm not going to go into the explanation of the structure of the test. That's better for you to read up, get familiar with the sections and the types of questions, right? The second thing, now this is where, the sources of thought might differ. We recommend that you always take up a diagnostic test. Now, obviously, there are two kinds of people. Some people who actually want to take up the diagnostic test because they want like a start point, and the second type of people who are scared of taking up a diagnostic test because it's been like a huge disconnect between when they were in school and learning math, or when they were learning grammar, and now they've forgotten all concepts, so they're very scared to see the numbers that pop up after that test, right? So I'll cater to both. Okay, it's not mandatory that you need to take up a diagnostic test, but we prefer that you take up a diagnostic test because, one, it gets you familiar with the types of questions that you're going to deal with. The first time you take up a diagnostic test on the quant front, you will realize that the questions there test you on very basic concepts, but it tests you more on your reasoning aspect rather than your quant aspect. And when you look at the verbal section, you'll realize that the grammar that we studied in school is not the actual grammar that's going to be tested here. Okay, we're going to be tested here on higher end grammar concepts, right? Something like parallelism and something like modifiers, right? Scary terms that you haven't learned in school, but very, very easy once you get an understanding of them. And obviously, critical reasoning and reading comprehension passages, way different from what you would have studied in school, because the reading comprehension passages here, very, very simple. All we used to do is go to the passage, look at the line that answers the question, pick that answer and move on, right? Way, way, way different here. Lots of weird topics varying from marine biology to English literature, right? So you have to get accustomed to the language and the types of passages that you read. Okay, so it makes sense for you to take up the diagnostic just for you to get a sense of what you're dealing with. And most importantly, what the diagnostic test gives you, right, is it gives you a ground zero to start from. Now, why that ground zero is important? Because it gives you information, it gives you data on how you need to phase out your entire preparation. I'll give you an example. Okay, let me shift to a sketchbook here, and let me take a couple of examples so that you understand how it works, right? So let's take 3 examples. Okay, let's take student A, let's take student B, and let's take student C, right? Now, when student A comes to me and says that I've got a diagnostic test score, say of quant 29 and verbal 22. Say student B comes to me and says, I have a quant score of say a quant 44, a verbal 19. And student C, maybe, we can classify these as, maybe retakers, come to me and say, I have a quant 48 or 49, and say I have a verbal 28. Now, the advice that I would give each of these students is going to be vastly different. Okay, because you'll need to first identify what kind of test taker are you, right? Are you a test taker who falls under bucket A, or are you a test taker who falls under bucket B, or are you a test taker who falls under bucket C? Because the advice that I would give a person who falls under this category of bucket A would be, first, clearly the quant score is very low, right? So it indicates that either the person is not very strong on the quant front, or a person with 5 to 8 years of experience who hasn't opened a mathematics book for like 8 years, not worked any problem other than using the calculator, right? So what I would recommend at this point is for that student to go through the basic quant course. Okay, we have a quant basic course, which is free for everybody to use, right? Registered students to use. All you have to do to access that course is to send an email to support@Crackverbal. You will get a free access. Please go through the entire basic quant course. Now, the reason why I'm particular about this is because it creates that foundation, and at least gives you like a refresher of sorts before you come into the classroom sessions for quant, or before you start with the mastering GMAT quant in terms of the online course. Okay, so just make sure you go through the basic quant course, because what happens on the quant front, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's in the online videos, the actual GMAT online videos, we start our explanations from a particular point. For example, if it's an algebra question, right? Nowhere in that question I'm going to sit and actually in-depth explain to you how to break down a quadratic equation. Now, that doesn't make sense for me to do it in a mastering GMAT quant session, when the purpose of that quadratic equation is going to be used to solve something else that the question asks. Okay, so the basic quant course takes care of how do you factorize a quadratic equation, how do you find the LCM, HCF, what are the rules of exponents that you need to work with, what are the rules of surds you have to work with, what are the basic formulae of geometry, what are the basic trigonometrical identities, algebraical identities. You don't have trigonometry on the GMAT, right? So things like that is dealt with the basic quant course. Okay, it forms like a bridge, it forms like a bridge towards your mastering GMAT quant course. I would also recommend at this point, right, and this is for both these test takers, right? I would recommend for test taker A also to go through the verbal basics PDF, right? Now, what we've done is we've actually sat and made an entire slide, around 120 to 150 slides of all the grammar concepts, right, with examples that the GMAT could possibly test you on. So we would start from something basic like what is a subject, what is an object, what is a verb, then we go into pronouns, then we go into modifiers, then we speak about participles, infinitives, all of these aspects of things, right? So it's more like a precursor to your sentence correction section, right? Because you'll need to have some grasp of grammar before you go into the sentence correction section. So it's better for you to go through the verbal basics PDF, spend some time on the basic quant course and the verbal basic PDF, because from my experience, that foundation of basics is the only thing that you can depend upon to score well on the GMAT. Okay, some people might tell you that you have strategies to solve verbal, you have strategies to solve quant. Strategies will only get you so far. Okay, strategic approach will only get you maybe a 600 or a 620 on the GMAT. But if you're looking at scoring more than that, then you'll have to make sure that your basics are in place. Got this? So let's take test taker B now, right? What would I advise test taker B? Clearly the quant score here is not very bad, right? It's around 44, and I know that because it's the first time he's taking up the test, he or she is taking up the test, right? Obviously, there would be timing issues. You would make silly errors in that time constraint that you have. So a 44 is a pretty decent start on the quant front. In this case, I wouldn't recommend, going through the basic quant course. Don't waste your time. Don't waste your time on going through this course because your basics are pretty much up there. Okay, so you can start directly, right? Start directly with the mastering GMAT quant course. Got this? So I see a question out there. I'll just try to address that question first, and then we'll move on. Eben, I told you, right? If it's a problem from, if you're not able to hear my voice, it's better you log out and log in because I don't see anybody else, complaining about, the voice and so on. How is GMAT in 2019 different from the test in recent years? I've seen the test now offers choice of order of tests and official guide has changed significantly for sentence correction. Okay, so see, I wouldn't go into details of it entirely because I think that's a completely different webinar altogether. I can speak for like an hour of what changes have been made, and for those who are going to attend my quant session at Koramangala, right? I would anyway in my first session speak about what changes are there and so on. But just to give you a brief, what you expect, right, in 2019 is this. You need to understand why changes have come about first, right? You'll need see what has happened before is MBA colleges only accepted the GMAT, but now what is happening? They're also accepting GRE scores, and what happens now is since the GRE is a more student-friendly test, right, compared to the GMAT, and it was around 3 hours 45 minutes long compared to the 4 hours of GMAT. So GMAT thought about making some changes. GMAC, the makers of the test, I thought about making some changes to the entire pattern. So what they brought in first was a section selection order. So now you can pick and choose one of three orders. You can either go by the default ordering of AWA, IR, quant, and verbal. The second option is quant, verbal, IR, AWA, and the third option is verbal, quant, IR, AWA. Right? You can make a choice between one of these three section orders. Right? Now, what section selection you take is up to you because it depends upon different people and different ways, their mentality is, right? Maybe I would prefer taking the quant section first because I'm very, very strong on the quant front. And when I come to the verbal section, I'm in the peak zone of my concentration, right? So I would take verbal later. And one thing also, and this is based on the fact that we also take the test, we are in constant touch with GMAC, and we also take feedback from students who have taken up the test. One thing we've always noticed is, and this is something that we predicted actually after the section selection order came about, the quant section is becoming slightly more trickier, slightly harder. And I'm sure if you'd spoken to your friends, some of you would have told you that, the questions that we got on the test were slightly harder than what I saw on the practice test or in the OG. And that's fair enough, right? Because that's a logical expectation you should have before you go and write the GMAT, because the questions in the OG and the questions on the practice test are questions that were retired almost 5 to 6 to 8 years back, and now the test is dynamic, right? The percentiles constantly keep changing, so people getting a 49 or 50 on quant previously now get a 49 or a 48, right? But since the section selection orders come into play, the verbal scores have increased slightly. So people getting maybe a 32 would now score a 33. So it's a trade-off that happens. The quant section is slightly harder because, when I say slightly harder, I'm not saying as hard as the verbal section. See, the verbal section is a different cup of tea altogether. Quant is very easy, right? And I'm speaking to you, being a quant faculty, I'm telling you that the quant aspect is very easy, provided you're a little careful on the quant section, right? Because the way they reduced the entire timing of the test, because in 2019 now, you're going to write a shortened test, right? So previously, instead of 37 questions in quant, you're going to write only 31 questions. You're going to attempt 31 questions, and on verbal, you're going to only attempt 36 questions as opposed to 41 on the test in 2018. So what has happened, the way they have removed the way they have shortened the test, right, is by removing the experimental questions that you have on each of the sections, right? So on the quant front, you're going to answer 31 questions, and 3 questions of those 31 would be experimental. They wouldn't contribute to your score. They wouldn't affect your test at all, right? But you will not know which 3 are experimental. And on the verbal front, out of 36 questions, 6 questions are experimental. So 30 questions will be taken into consideration to your score. Okay, so those are the changes that have taken place, right, in 2019. The quant is slightly trickier, verbal is slightly easier. The percentiles are slightly revised because almost a year or 2 years back, 49 on quant, right? 49 on quant was approximately a 76th percentile. A 49 on quant current day is 74th percentile. Okay, so you see what has happened. This was just 1 year back, right? Maybe around 8 to 9 months back. So it's dropped a couple of percentiles, and you'll need to look at it. And when you look at the score on the quant and verbal front, right, you will need to look at it in terms of a percentile and not in terms of the 49, the scale score, because 49 out of 51 sounds very, very good, right? But when I tell you 49 is a 74th percentile, that becomes a big problem, right? And put things in perspective, 44 on the quant front is the 50th percentile. Okay, that's how the scores on quant are, bunched towards the top. So in comparison to verbal, I think 29 is the 50th percentile, right? So a 29 on quant, a 29 on verbal is corresponding to a 44 score on quant. Okay, so you can see the vast difference in difficulty also there. Got this? So that's the few differences that are there in 2019. And what I feel, right, personally, is the way you approach the test now in 2019 should be slightly different from what you did previously. Because what people used to do previously is they used to take some logical guesses and then skip on some questions and move on. But now, since the number of experimental questions have reduced, right, you can't afford too many mistakes on the quant and the verbal sections. And what we've seen also that GMAT is doing is they are not testing you on single concepts, they are testing you on multiple concepts at once. Okay, so you might have a question which is a probability question in the guise of a coordinate geometry question. Okay, something like that, right? And a sentence correction question will never test you on one concept, right? So you'll have modifiers being tested, parallelism and idioms being tested in one question. So these are the changes that they have brought about in 2019. Okay, so I'm just giving you a brief. I told you I can speak about this for almost an hour and a half. I don't want to get into too many details on this. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, Ashutosh. Niketan, okay, fair question you asked, okay, but think about it. I'll put across an analogy. I'll put across, an explanation, which will give you like a better sense of things, right? Or you yourself can answer your question. Think about it. I have a college, and I only restrict admissions to GMAT, and only 500,000 or only say 50,000 people in India, take the GMAT. But 5 lakhs people in India take the GRE. So what do you think I have to gain there, right? So that I think that should answer your question, doesn't it? So it gives them a bigger pool to pick from, right? It gives them more applications, from where they can earn, right? And it also gives you alternate modes of applying. But see, I know you have GRE as an alternate option, but you need to understand that GMAT, obviously they need a yardstick to compare the two tests. So even if you go the GRE route, your score on the GRE would be changed to on the GMAT scale. Okay, so something like a 323 on the GRE would be something like a 690 or 700 on the GMAT. Okay, so that's how they would do it. They would convert the GRE score on the GMAT scale and then consider you for the applications, right? So it's a very simple question to answer. Great. So coming back to this point, right? So like I said, test taker B, quant 44, verbal 19, no basic quant course, directly go to the mastering GMAT quant course. But I would definitely recommend that person goes to the verbal basic PDF, right? Because verbal clearly needs the more attention of the two, right? And when it comes to test taker C, right, the quant is at a 48, 49. When your quant score is at a 48, 49, right, I wouldn't want you to go through the entire course, okay, entire mastering GMAT course. You'll have to first sit down and identify what areas on the quant section are you going wrong at. right? The common problem or the common pain points, right, would be people don't like data sufficiency too much, right? So you may make mistakes on data sufficiency. You may not like the concept of inequalities and absolute values. You may not like permutations, combinations, probability. So you basically identify all of these as your weak areas, and you only focus on those areas. Look through the videos of those topics, work the questions based on those topics, and continue your practice on the other topics as well. So don't waste your time to going through ratios, percentages, geometry. If your concepts there is pretty clear, because it's just going to be, you wasting your time listening to whatever concepts you learned before. Got it? So just make sure you focus on those specific topics and you continue your practice on the other topics that you're not looking at the videos for, right? On the verbal front, again, here you'll have to identify normally any score of a verbal 28 to 32, right? Tells you two things. Out of sentence correction, critical reasoning, and RC, two of the sections normally would be an issue, and one section you would be pretty strong at. Okay, that's the general tendency. When I see scores from 28 to 32, this would be the general tendency, right? So you figure out which two sections you'll have to work with, right? Normally the pain points would be CR and RC. For some people it would be the reverse case. RC would be absolutely fine. This is more in terms of arts students, commerce students, right? You would find it, and people who are in the process of reading, you would find RC pretty comfortable, but SC and CR, you'll figure out that you need to learn concepts, right? So the first thing that I want all of you all to do, and this is where the diagnostic test will give you some more clarity, is take a step back, right? Inflect, and I mean, I'm not saying inflect, I'm saying inflect. Okay, I'm assuming you all know what the meaning of inflect is. So inflect and figure out what kind of bucket you fall under. Is it student A bucket? Is it student B bucket? Or is it the student C bucket? Based on that, you decide what you need to do, right? If you fall under student A bucket, what we recommend is a good 3 to 4 month plan, where the first month goes into working through your basics of quant and verbal, and the next 2 months goes with you going through the actual GMAT course, and the last month goes with you taking up practice tests. If you fall under student B bucket, then it'll just, you can directly start with the verbal course and the quant course. The verbal basic course will just take you like a week to go through. It'll take you 2 months to wrap up the entire quant course and the verbal course, and then 1 month for you to practice and take up practice tests. So in your case, this would be a 3 month time frame. And for a retaker, right? For a retaker, I would say the ideal time, since you're in the zone of taking up the test and preparing, I would say the ideal time would be around 1 to 1.5 months. Okay, don't push it further, because when you start procrastinating on things become a little problem, right? And when you're in the zone of working, it's better for you to get done with the entire GMAT then and there. Okay, so I'm assuming that I'm clear on what I want to say here. Okay, so you'll have to always be, self-critical. Okay, always like put a mirror in front of you and figure out, okay, what do I think is best for me? Got it? So I see a couple of more questions. Is the test same worldwide, or is there any minor differences? The test is absolutely the same worldwide, Ankush. There's no minor differences at all. Even if a person from Zimbabwe is giving the test and even a person from India is giving the test, the questions levels they see, the algorithm exactly works the same. Okay. What's the ratio of applications from GRE to GMAT? Very good question. Very good question. We've got data from this because we attend the GMAT seminars that GMAT host at Gurgaon, Delhi on a yearly basis, right? So the percent split is 5% of the total applicants are from GRE and 95% of the applicants are from GMAT. Okay. So when I speak about 4 months of study, Shika, I'm saying I'm taking into consideration it's a working professional. So approximately 2.5 hours of work per day. Is TOEFL and IELTS also needed with the GMAT? Amir, ideally, it's better for you to take the TOEFL and the IELTS if the college asks for it. Some colleges will waive off the TOEFL and the IELTS because they see that your entire education has been in a English medium school or university, right? So some colleges waive it off, but some colleges will ask you to take it up. Okay, so that depends upon the colleges. You'll have to check that during the application process, right? What is the disadvantage of the 3-month study plan for a retaker? Um, I'll put it this way, Ankur. I'll put it this way. Uh, when I speak about a retaker, right, there are two types of retakers, right? What I've taken care of here is a retaker who's pretty much there, right? 49 and a 32 would give him something like a 650, correct? So anybody in the range, a retaker who's in the range of 630 to 650 and looking at a 690, 700 and above, then 1.5 months makes sense. But if you fall under a retaker where you've got, less than 600, then it's better for you to shift to the 3-month study plan. Okay, because your basics are in place, but you'll have to work a little more on other things, right? Sonal, I said you have the option of looking at the recording on the YouTube channel, right? Yes, anybody with 3 or more years of experience at GMAT is a better route, to apply because, like I said, no, 95% of the applicants would be from GMAT. Yes, Ashutosh, the Indian applicants have to score a tad bit higher. The same goes for Chinese applicants, right? So if the cutoff on a school is 710, ideally we would ask you to get a 730 because you'll need to understand that the competition that you're going to have, right? Any college, any MBA school, no, will want to have like a diverse set of people in the class, right? So for me to maintain the diversity, I can't just pick from a huge pool of Indians and Chinese, right? Correct. So how do you factor this into GMAT B school strategy? Um, my advice, always apply for round one. Okay, round one is the best probability for you to get in. So apply for round one. And also, you can actually go to the websites and look at the data of in the, say, the 2019 intake or the 2018 intake, right? What was the diversity in the class, right? How many of them were from the US, how many from India? So where you see, colleges, you see a slightly a tad bit higher Asian population, I think those colleges are pretty good. It gives you some good chances to apply at. Pragya, if you have 1 to 1.6 years of experience, also I don't think it's too much of an issue because you have something called an early entry options that you can apply with. I think most of the students ask the same thing, right? What if I have less than 2 years of experience? If you're applying to the GMAT, you'll need a pretty high score, right? You'll need something like a 740 or a 750 because your application, because you don't have too much of work experience to actually speak about, your application will not be as strong as a person with 5 years of experience, right? So you'll have to score a GMAT, you'll have to have a slightly higher GMAT score to compensate for that. I'll come to the homework, right? So for those of you who are asking me questions about the homework, my next slide is based on that. So I'm just catering to the questions here. Um, Shika, again, I told you, right? I mean, that the reason why I gave you the example of, not asking me application questions is because we can go on and on, right? People with the IT background fall under the cliched category, right? So obviously, taking data from ISB, around 800 and odd applicants on ISB last year, and out of that 660 and odd were people from the IT background, right? So you'll need to understand that there's a huge population of IT people who are going to apply. So when you have a cliched profile, it's your score and your extracurriculars and your applications is going to give you like extra edge. 2020 first round. So see, when you say 2020 first round, that means you are going to join your course in 2021. Okay, Sanju, I'm assuming you know that. If you want to join the batch of 2020, then you will have to start your applications in August of 2019. That's how it works. Okay. August, September, October 2019, first round will get you an admit to 2020, which normally the course starts in March, April, May, June, right? 2020 first round, if you apply, then you're joining in 2021. 2 years of work experience is absolutely enough for MIM, right? We suggest people taking the MIM course. We suggest people with lesser than 2 years of experience to take up an MIM course. But the difference is, an MIM course gives you mid-level management, right? An MBA course gives you an upper level management. That's why the MBA is more preferred. like I said, no, 48 and 19, you fall under the second category, right? So category B. So I would recommend you follow the 2-month verbal study plan, and you keep 1 month towards the end for practice, right? I would say for a person with the 48, 19, you phase out your verbal prep because your verbal needs a lot of improvement, right? It's better to phase out your verbal prep over 2 months rather than crunching it in 1 month. Anybody can apply for the GMAT. Okay, so even a school, as long as you have a valid passport, right, and you're beyond, I think, the age of 12 or 14, I think you can apply for the GMAT, right? So you don't need to worry. Rupesh, I think your experience in the Navy will count big time in your application. Okay, your profile is very different from anybody else's, so that is going to be a plus point on your applications. Yes, so I will take the Q&A in the last part, right? So I have to cater to these questions here based on this. I'll give you a Q&A. The Q&A that I give you in the end will be more specific, right? Perfect. So coming to the next, going to the next slide. Now, what are the resources that you need to use, right? Very simple. I would prefer you keep this simple. I would not want you to make a mess of things. There's a lot of resources out there, but the most trusted resources are the official resources, right? So the official guide 2018 or 2019, any one will do. Just make sure you use one edition, please. Don't use all the editions, because you'll end up finding that almost 85% of the content overlaps. So whichever edition you use is absolutely fine. We recommend that you use either the 2018 or the 2019 editions. Okay. And this is how I would do it. Okay. This is my personal recommendation. And for people also who I've been assigned a mentor, right, I would normally recommend this. While you're going through the entire quant and verbal course, right, my advice is to work the homework questions from the OG only. Okay, and what we provide you is a segregated homework of quant and segregated homework questions for verbal. So we've actually segregated all the questions into topics and subtopics, and we've given you a homework sheet. I do not want you to work with the quant review and the verbal review as you're going through the entire course curriculum. Okay, and your focus when you're going through the entire course and working questions from the OG is not it should never be on time. The focus more should be on accuracy. Okay, you need to have at least an 85% accuracy on all of the sections. Don't worry about the timing aspect. The timing aspect will come later, right? After you finish the course and after you've completed the questions from the official guide, that is when you would work with the quant review and the verbal review, right? And this is how we recommend you use the quant review. My personal suggestion: take 31 questions on quant, 17 questions from problem solving, 14 questions from data sufficiency, and solve them in a time frame of 62 minutes. So now what you're doing, you're shifting from accuracy and you're focusing on time. And you're also attuning your mind to juggle between multiple concepts at once. Like I said, no question will actually test you on one concept. So suddenly you're going to get a permutations combination question, you solve it, suddenly you move to coordinate geometry question. So you need to train your mind to juggle between multiple concepts at once and get to the process of solving very quickly. So make sets of 31 questions, 17 PS, 14 DS, and work it out in 62 minutes. For the verbal review, make a set of 36 questions, 12 questions from sentence correction, 12 questions from critical reasoning, and 4 RC passages. Okay. Ideally, each RC passage will have around 3 to 4 questions. So ideally on the test also, you're going to get 4 RC passages, or you're going to get 3 RC passages where all the 3 passages are going to be really, really long. So 12 SC, 12 CR, and 4 RC passages, and you solve these questions in a time frame of 65 minutes. And why is this important to do this? I'm saying this timed practice is good for the verbal front is because no sentence correction question will test you only on one concept. Now, what we are doing, right, and this is something I don't like personally, segregating questions for sentence correction, no, into parallelism, modifiers, comparisons, and so on, is actually not a good idea. Because one, if I tell you now that that question actually tests you on parallelism, you are not actually tuning your mind to actually search for that error. You already know that it's testing you on parallelism. You will check for parallelism errors, right? So when you work with questions in a pool, right, in a mixed bag set, that's when you'll actually train your mind to first read the question and first identify what kind of errors does the question deal with. Okay. So when you work with the quant review and the verbal review, your mind should go towards timed practice, and your mind should also go towards juggling between multiple concepts at once. Got this? What we do is we keep 2 checkpoints. The first checkpoint is checkpoint 1. Checkpoint 1 is when you finish the course plus you do the OG homework. This is where you take one practice test. This practice test will tell you, it'll indicate what areas you'll have to focus on further. It'll also indicate how you manage time and what aspects you need to change in your time management. And finally, checkpoint 2 is once you finish the quantitative review and the verbal review, you would take one practice test. Because now, again, this practice test will see how well you've managed your time, right? It tells you how well you've managed your time. Second, it also tells you what specific areas, again, you'll have to focus on when you go to your last phase of prep. And third, it will put you onto a process where you'll have to focus on those problem areas, and you'll get into a process now of taking practice tests on a weekly basis. Okay. So when you start off, remember your thought process should be, I'm going to work my way through the entire course and work with the OG homework questions. Post that, I'm going to take one practice test. Second, work with quantitative review and verbal review in question sets in a timed manner. Post that, take another practice test. Got this? So I see 6 questions already here. Since the QR is in order of difficulty, how would you suggest to pick the questions? See, my advice for any test taker, right? And this is something that I want all of you all to know, to keep in mind from day one. Many people come to me and say that, I've got a 44 on quant. So when I've got a 44 on quant, I've got the harder questions wrong. That's a completely, I would say the worst analysis that you can possibly make. If you've got a 44 on quant, the problem is not you answered the harder questions at all. You've not even seen the harder questions. That means you made mistakes on the medium and the medium hard questions. And when you make mistakes on the medium and the medium hard questions, the questions don't adapt themselves to the higher level. So it's high chance you've not seen any higher level questions at all. So my advice is you go with the flow of the quantitative review. Don't worry about the difficulty levels, but keep in mind that towards the end, obviously the questions become harder. So if towards the end your accuracy drops slightly, maybe from 90% to 75%, the reason is because the questions are slightly harder, right? So if you maintain an accuracy of 75% in the last 25 to 50 questions, right, I think that should be a good sign. Okay. Gave GMAT twice last year, got 600. Okay, Pradeep, we'll come to this specific query towards the end. Okay, so you can ask me this question specific because I need to speak about things specific to you, right? How much time frame between checkpoint and checkpoint 1 and checkpoint 2? I told you it's going to be a 2-month process, right? It's going to be a 2-month process. I would say it should take you approximately 5 to 6 weeks to reach checkpoint 1, and it should take you approximately 1 to 2 weeks to reach checkpoint 2. Okay, so that's the ideal time frame. It would be approximately spread over 2 months, right? So checkpoint 1 is going to take you a long time because you'll have to go through the videos too. Yeah, I would review things in the end, so no problem on that. Okay. Okay, fine. So let's go to the next slide. So this is about what you need to do. Okay, I'm assuming it's pretty clear on this. Now, I have a couple of resources here that I would also recommend in addition to the official resources. The one I already mentioned before is the Quant Basic course. I would also maybe recommend the Fundamentals of GMAT Quant from Manhattan GMAT. It's a good book. You can find the PDF online. Good resource materials. I would recommend that you use this book in addition to the Quant Basic course while going through your basics. We have the Crackverbal Basics PDF, and you also have the Fundamentals of GMAT Verbal from Manhattan GMAT, right? So I would definitely ask you to, use that book in addition to the verbal basic PDF that we have. Okay, so these are the other extra material that I would recommend beyond the OG. Got this? So I'll tell you, I'll go in phases. Okay, this is phase one. I'll tell you what you need to do in phase two. How to use the advanced documents. Some people would have had a question. What is the advanced documents? What are retired GMAT questions? I'll come to that towards the end. Phase one. This is what is required. Are everybody clear on this phase one, so that I can go on to phase two? And I'm going to speak about phase two for a lot longer time, because I'm going to work on how to analyze questions, okay, and how to maintain an error log. So that's important. Sonal, what is quant review and verbal review? Uh, that's again, an FAQ. Ideally, you're supposed to research on what the GMAT entails and what material you have out there, right? So there are three books that GMAT provide. One is the OG, one is the verbal review, and the other one is quant review. Verbal review and quant review are additional, books, which is verbal specific and quant specific, that have official questions in addition to the OG. Okay, so I'm assuming you've not gone through the material that you've got from us, not seen the Dropbox links. So it's better at least look up the video. I think most of you all would have been sent a video of how to go about the course. So everything should be mentioned there. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the second phase, right? Now, obviously, you've created a study plan. I gave you three study plans of student A, student B, student B, student C. You design your study plan, customized to around 90 minutes or 2 hours, whatever work schedule you have. Homework, like I said, you have questions on the OG. Stick to the OG, right? Then go to VR and QR. Practice from only official material. And then finally, I would say take practice test too, right? So I summarize things a little, in the previous slide itself. But there's one thing that I want to focus on in this phase too, okay, especially when you're working with questions from the OG, the verbal review and the quant review, how you need to analyze questions and how you need to, say, maintain an error log. Okay, so what I have here is the only way and the most feasible way for me to explain what points you need to add to your error log and how you need to get better at things, right, is by taking a couple of questions. So I have like 3 to 4 questions here. It may also give you some practice, may expose you to what the GMAT actually tests you on. So I have a question here. I want all of you all to give a shot at it. Okay, this is what we call a data sufficiency question. I mean, most of you all should know it, because if you've done some research on the GMAT, you should know it. So I want all of you all to give a shot at this question. I'm going to give you exactly like 2 minutes. It's a very easy one to start with. 2 minutes. I don't want any of you all to type in the answer in the chat window. Only do it after I tell you to. Okay. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I want all of you all to give a shot at this question. We'll have a discussion at the end of 2 minutes, and I'm going to tell you what is the takeaway from this question. All right. See, one thing you'll need to understand, guys, any answer which comes in 5 seconds is something you should discard. Okay, so I would always say take a step back, revisit things. Okay. Guys, don't type in the answer until I ask you to do so, please. Okay. Okay, so you can start typing your answers in the chat window, please. Raghavendra, the answers have to be out of A, B, C, D, and E, right? So just answer it based on that. Okay, last 10 seconds for you guys to put in your answer quickly. Okay. Lubna, normally a data sufficiency is a very standard type of question, right? So, I mean, I wouldn't put the answer choices here. Any test taker is expected to know what the answer choices A, B, C, D, and E are, right? So, it's better for you to get accustomed to the data sufficiency question type, because the answer choices normally will reflect in the questions, but it doesn't make sense for me to go and look at the answer choices and then go on reading and seeing what is sufficient, right? It's standard format. It's better for you to get used to it. Okay, so I see a very mixed bag of questions, right? For those of you who are looking at the chat window, also, you saw that there were pretty good number of D's, pretty good number of C's too, lot of A's, lots of E's, even some B's. Okay, somebody started with a B, and I said that it's better you take a step back. See, the problem with the questions on the quant section, right? The problems on questions on data sufficiency is if you're a little hasty, right? You're going to be penalized very badly. So you'll need to know, and this is something that you should do from the beginning. You'll need to develop like a very structured way of approaching any data sufficiency question. Okay, the first thing you do when you work with data sufficiency is you figure out what kind of data sufficiency question are you dealing with. There are always two kinds of data sufficiency questions: a value data sufficiency question and a yes no data sufficiency question. Okay, uh, I'm not going in depth on this because your videos will normally take care of these two. But the first thing is you do is you identify what kind of data sufficiency you're dealing with. So the question here is, did one of the three members of a certain team sell at least 2 raffle tickets yesterday? So if I have to answer this question, the only way I can answer this question is with a yes or a no, right? So clearly it falls under a yes, no data sufficiency. And remember, the question asks you, did one of the three members sell at least 2 raffles? At least 2 means 2 or greater yesterday. And what these two statements do, right? The two statements given are actually additional pieces of information that the question provides. What you'll have to do is you'll have to use the additional piece of information and check whether the additional piece of information is actually enough information to answer the question. So the first statement says the three members sold a total of 6 raffle tickets yesterday. So we have three members, A, B, C, and I know they sold a total of 6 raffle tickets yesterday. So ideally, if they sell a total of 6 raffle tickets yesterday, ideal scenario will be each of them sold equal number of raffle tickets, right? So each of them sold 2, 2, and 2. Now in this scenario, I have at least one people. Did one of the three members? Does one of the three members sell at least 2 raffle tickets yesterday? Definitely yes in this scenario. Agree? Because I have one person who sold 2 and more raffle tickets. In fact, all of them have sold. So it answers the question with a definite yes. And now I can juggle between the numbers, right? It need not be 2, 2 and 2. I can also say this is 0, 0 and 6. Right? I can say only C sold all 6. But in this case also, I'm still going to have one of the members who sold at least 2 raffle tickets yesterday, right? So this also gives me a yes. And you'll realize whatever I do, right? If I juggle the numbers around, I will always get one person who sold at least 2 raffle tickets yesterday, because the minimum I can go to for each person is 2, 2 and 2. Got this? I mean, minimum across the board for all 3 people. So I know I'm not able to, disprove this statement. This statement is actually giving me enough information to say that there is always going to be one person who sells at least 2 raffle tickets yesterday. So the first statement clearly is sufficient. And when the first statement is sufficient, the 3 possible answers, or the 2 possible answer choices we have is AD. Okay. Don't worry about AD, BC. Once you go through the videos, you'll understand what it means. Now the second statement says, no 2 of the 3 members sold the same number of raffle tickets yesterday. So if I have A, B, and C, and the question tells me, no 2 of the 3 members sold the same number of raffle tickets yesterday. So think about it, guys. Think about it. Would this statement be sufficient or would it be insufficient? Right? I've proved the first statement to be sufficient, right? Is the second statement sufficient? No 2 of the 3 members, right? No 2 of the 3 members sold the same number of raffle tickets yesterday. Think about it. Can you explain a little more on why would that be sufficient? No 2 of the 3 members. Exactly. So even if I take the smallest possible value, right? No 2 of the 3 members sold the same number. So if I keep A as 0, B has to sell 1 and C has to sell 2. That's the minimum possible value that I can go to. And in whatever case I take now further from 0, 1 and 2, I'll always have at least one person who sold 2 or more raffle tickets yesterday, right? So the second statement also gives me enough information to solve. And the answer here is delta. So what you'll have to do, right? And the point that I'm making here is when you solve a data sufficiency question, you can't just skip the statements without actually doing some, mathematical calculations. And you'll always have to develop a mentality that I have to first look at the 2 statements individually and check whether the statements are sufficient to answer the question or not individually. And how do I say a statement is sufficient? If that statement is enough to give me one definite answer. If that statement is not enough to give me one definite answer, I would discard it. So the first thing is to get accustomed to what the question type entails and how you need to approach a data sufficiency. Okay. So make sure that you get familiar with this, because when we go to other topics, the data sufficiency aspect kicks in. So in addition to you knowing the topical, concepts that are discussed, you'll also need to know how to approach that in terms of a data sufficiency question. You see, I just didn't discard the statement, right? I actually put it in the scenarios, and you realize that you'll never be able to get any person to sell less than 2 raffle tickets yesterday, right? It's always going to be 2 or more. Okay with this, everybody? Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so taking things slightly a notch higher now. Yes, no problem, Ashutosh. I can have a data sufficiency question where one statement gives me a definite yes and the other statement gives me a definite no, right? The purpose of a data sufficiency is not to see what the answer is. The purpose of a data sufficiency is to see, is that data sufficient to answer the question? Okay. So even if you get a question where first statement gives you a definite yes, second statement gives you a no, it's not wrong. But ideally, the GMAT wouldn't do that. Okay, if they give you one state, if you have the scenario of both statements to be sufficient, it'll ideally be both yeses or both nos. Okay, but it's not wrong, huh? It's not wrong, because I need to check whether the statement is sufficient or not. I don't need to see what the answer is. Okay, so that's the first bit. Okay, I think on the quant front, you will need to get a very structured process on solving a data sufficiency. But let's now, look at a slightly harder question and see what happens there. Okay. The biggest takeaway that I feel that every test taker should always inculcate is learning from mistakes. Making mistakes, some people think it's a bad thing. I feel it's a very good thing, because you learn from your mistakes, and whatever mistakes you make on questions, you will learn to eliminate them later towards the end. Okay, if you always keep in mind, okay, I need to avoid this error. So again, same drill. I'm going to give all of you all 2 minutes. Try, give a shot at this question. Do not type in the answer in the chat window until I ask you to do so. Your time starts now. Guys, again, something that I'm going to repeat. Anything which comes in 5 to 10 seconds is something you always take a look at again. Okay. Okay, you can start typing your answers in the chat window, please. Last 10 seconds. Last call for answers. Quickly type in the answer in the chat window, please. Okay, so very, very good question. Okay, and I would say this is exactly the type of question that a person who starts off with their preparation should learn from. Okay, because I see a very, based on the answers, I've seen a very equal split between people who've answered A and people who've answered E. For those who answered E, I think you already have the first aspect here in place. So good for you. For people who've answered A, right, there is definitely a take back, and this is what I would add in my error log of sorts, right? What is an error log first? An error log is actually a set of pointers that you learn from each of the questions that you review. Okay, when you review a question and you answered it wrong, you'll have to write a set of pointers. For example, while working with questions of this type, this is the thing I have to keep in mind. While working questions on modifiers, I need to be aware of the adverbial modifier. Okay, things like that, right? You'll have to be very, very specific with the types of pointers that you put in. Now, one big mistake that most of y'all gave, and there's a pretty high proportion of people who've given me alpha as the answer. The reason you've given me alpha as the answer is because you said if x square is an integer, then x also has to be an integer. Not necessarily. If x square is an integer, x can be 1, definitely yes. X square is definitely an integer, so x also is an integer, but x can also be root 2, root 3, right? So I know for a fact, if x square is an integer, I don't need to say that x is definitely an integer. This gives me a yes, but this roots give me a no, right? So what all of you all did, and this is what is the point that you're going to add in your error log, is never assume numbers to be integers, right? You should never assume numbers to be integers. What should always do is when you are putting in values or picking values, right? Check for all types of values. Even decimals are numbers, right? Even roots are numbers. And the third point that I would always add, and this is something that will help you always in a data sufficiency, always have a negative mentality when you work with the data sufficiency. Never try to prove a statement to be sufficient. Always try to prove a statement to be insufficient. Okay, that's the best thing to do. Always prove something to be insufficient. So here, what you all did is you all said if x square is an integer, x has to be an integer. Not necessarily. X square can be 2. X square is definitely an integer here, but x can be root 2, right? Root 2 is definitely not an integer. So clearly the first statement is insufficient. BCE. The second statement was pretty easy to eliminate. X by 2 is not an integer. So if x by 2 is not an integer, x can be 1, x can be root 2, x can be half, x can be anything I want, right? As long as it doesn't make x by 2 to be an integer. Does x have to be an integer here? Sometimes it can be a yes, sometimes it can be a no. So clearly insufficient. And when I club the two again, you'll realize if x square is an integer and x by 2 is not an integer, then the values of x that you can still continue to take are integer values of x. X can be say 1, x can also be root 2, right? X can also be root 3 because root 2 whole square is definitely an integer and root 2 by 2 is definitely not an integer, right? So roots also satisfy both the statements together. So clearly x again here is not an integer because it gives me a yes, it also gives me a no. So clearly insufficient. So what you need to add, and this is for people, normally you make these mistakes when you start off your prep, okay, on data sufficiency. So when you start your prep on data sufficiency, these are the types of questions that you learn from. So what you'll have to make a note of is, okay, when I'm using values, I don't need to constrain my thinking only to integers, right? I need to use fractions, I need to use roots. And then I need to develop a negative mentality of not proving a statement to be sufficient, but proving a statement to be insufficient. Got this? So for everybody who gave me an alpha as the answer, did you understand why alpha is not and why echo is right? For those who got echo, great. And maybe the next question might challenge you slightly more. Let's see. Okay. Okay, but guys, any questions on this? Any questions on this? Have you understood what I meant by the points that you put in your error log, right? So if you made this mistake, right, these are the 3-4 points that you add to your error log, and you always learn from your mistakes, right? If you made that error again, if you made this error, you're not going to make this error again, right? So making mistakes is a good thing. You learn from them. Any doubts on these guys? All of you all? Any doubts on this question? Okay, so that's the second point I wanted to make, right? And that's what you'll have to be a little careful about when you work with your error log. Now the third type of question, or the third type of point that I wanted to get accustomed to while solving data sufficiency is learn to develop key strategies. Okay, especially at points that you get stuck at, right? Obviously, now it's a carry forward. The previous question was a pretty easy one. The next question is going to be slightly a tad more difficult. 2 points I'm going to make here. One, uh, what you need to carry over from the previous slide, and second, what strategies can you develop? So again, same rigmarole. 2 minutes. Your 2 minutes start now. Guys, for the third time, I'm repeating, anybody who puts in the answer in 5 seconds, I would want you to always rethink. Guys, one thing you'll have to learn is to take away what we've discussed at every point, right? In the last slide, I just told you not to assume that things are integers always, right? So if you're making that same mistake again, then you're not learning from your mistakes. Okay, you can start typing your answers in the chat window, please. Yes, Karthik, evens and odds only apply to integers. Definitely not D, Karthik. Okay, so now this is a very, 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 very good question that you have a lot to learn from. Okay, a lot to learn from. Only I just counted. I know I just saw scanned through the entire answer choice. Only 2 or 3 people have given me the exact answer to this. Right, all of y'all have got this wrong. Okay, the answer to this question is C for Charlie, and most of y'all have given me D for Delta because you didn't take on board what I told you in the last slide. So what y'all said, the question was, is Z even? The first statement says that 5Z is even. Now, what y'all did, right, is this is exactly what I told you about creating a negative mentality. What y'all did is y'all said, okay, if 5Z has to be even, Z has to be even. No, not necessarily. Z can be 2. I agree with you, right? Z can be 2 here. So because 5 into 2 is 10. And Z is definitely even, so it gives you a yes. But why are you only limiting your thinking only to integers? Why can't Z be 2 by 5? What's wrong in that? The question tells me 5Z is even. It doesn't tell me anything about whether Z is an integer or not, right? Z can be any possible value you can have as long as it satisfies what the statement says. So if 5Z is even, Z can be 2, 5 into 2 is 10, but Z can also be 2 by 5, right? 5 into 2 by 5 is 2. That is also satisfying the statement, but is 2 by 5 even? Definitely no. So BCE. So you see what happens? I'm just turning the notch slightly higher and going into the harder levels of questions, and you see how many traps you're falling for, right? And this is something you'll have to learn from, right? Most of y'all didn't take on board what I told you in the last example and put it here, right? You fell for the same thing. You all assumed that Z was an integer, and that's what the GMAT wants you to do, right? That is why this would be a slightly harder level question because the traps are very, very intricate here. Everybody okay with the fact of how I discarded the first statement? Just putting things out there. Agree with me that Z can be 2 or Z can be 2 by 5, right? So obviously the first statement is not sufficient, isn't it? All of y'all, for those who gave me D as the answer. Perfect. Now the same thing I can do for the second statement, right? The second statement says 3Z is even. Again, nowhere has it told me that Z is an integer, right? So Z can be 2. So this gives me a yes. But Z can also be 2 by 3. This gives me a no. Right? 2 by 3 is 3 into 2 by 3 is 2. If Z is 2 by 3, is Z even? Definitely not, right? So I get a yes and a no. It doesn't answer the question with a definite yes or no. So clearly insufficient. Got it? Now this is where the developing strategies comes into play. Okay, I will illustrate a little. This is illustrated anyway in the videos for the online course, and this is again I'll illustrate this in the quant sessions at Koramangala. But the first step you have to understand is you don't assume variables are integers if they are not mentioned. The second thing is when you're combining statements, now things become very tricky for me, because when I combine the statements, I have 5Z to be even and I have 3Z to be even. And the problem with combining statements is I have to make sure that whatever value I take for Z has to satisfy both statements simultaneously. So clearly all of you all will say Z is equal to 2 is a number which satisfies both simultaneously. So Z can be even. But now since I've spoken about integers and decimals and fractions and all, right, you'll have this, nagging doubt in your head. What if there was a really, really large fraction which made 5Z an even number and 3Z an even number, right? So when you combine statements, right, using numbers is not always the best way to go forward. And this is where the strategy comes into play. Whenever you come into a question where you're forced to combine the two statements, the best thing to do is to treat the two statements like an algebraic equation. And you manipulate these two statements algebraically such that it helps you answering what the question asks you. So you see how I'm going to algebraically manipulate these questions, right? These statements. I am going to multiply the second statement by 2. If 3Z is even, 2 into 3Z is 6Z, and even into 2 and even into another even number will always be even. So if I know that 3Z is even, I know 6Z is also even. And since I know 6Z is even and 5Z is also even, I can subtract these two. 6Z minus 5Z is basically an even number minus another even number. And you see how I'm manipulating these statements, right? I'm manipulating statements in such a way that it answers what question is being asked. So 6x minus 5z gives me z, and an even number minus another even number gives me an even number. So basically when I combine the two statements, I know for a fact now by a mathematical manipulation that z has to be even, and that's exactly what the question is asking me to find. Answer is Charlie. This. So that's the strategy, that's the key strategy that you'll have to develop, right? So when I combine statements, what do I do? Especially on questions like these. When you combine statements, the best thing to do is instead of putting in values, to solve them algebraically, right? And try to solve them algebraically in such a way that it always answers what the question asks you to find. Okay with this, guys? So that is the second, the second or the third point that you can put in an error log. When you're combining statements, always solve algebraically and work towards what the question asks you, right? And another point you would again reiterate, don't assume integers, don't assume variables to be integers. Okay with this, guys, all of you all? Sarvana, if you subtract 5z minus 3z, right, you get 2z. And when you get 2z is even, I have to put in a value for z to satisfy this statement that you've got into. And whatever value for z that I put in here, right, I again have to cross check with 5z. Sorry, I again have to cross check for 5z and 3z whether it satisfies, because I can't use the random values for z here which satisfies 2z but doesn't satisfy 5z and 3z. Got it? That is the problem of subtracting the two directly, because I just get information about 2z, isn't it? Okay, so if I get information about 2z, put a value for z there. If I put z is equal to 1, it's not going to satisfy the two statements individually. The rule of a data sufficiency is you always make sure the statements are satisfied individually before you can combine them, right? You have to satisfy the statements when you combine them. Okay with this, guys, all of you all? Okay, so what are the 3 points that you need to note here? Okay, I'll just erase the entire ink from the slide here. So what are the 3 points? The first point that you note is this, that you take care of in your error log, is do not assume that variables are integers, right? What you all did is you all didn't think of numbers, you all didn't think of fractions. You all directly said if 5z is even, z has to be even, which was completely wrong. Z can be a fraction too, right? So don't assume that things are only integers. The second, always have a negative mentality, right? Always think negatively. What do I mean by think negatively? Somebody asked it previously. I am not going to try to prove the statement to be sufficient. I think Raghavendra, you asked that. So when you said 5z is even, right? I'm not going to put values of z which satisfy the statement. I'm going to put values to satisfy the statement, but I'm going to put values of z which disproves the statement, not proves it. For example, you put z is 2, z is 4, z is 6, and so on. I would look at z is equal to 2. This gives me a yes to the main question. Now I've already got a yes, right? So I would try to contradict this and try to get a no. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to prove the statement to be insufficient. I'm not trying to prove the statement to be sufficient. So z can also be 2 by 5. And this gives me the no. So that's the negative mentality that I'm asking you to work with, right? Always think of proving a statement to be insufficient. Never try to prove things to be sufficient. That's very easy to do. And the third point is when you're combining statements, right? When you're combining statements, it's better, instead of putting in values, always go an algebraic route. And whatever algebraic route you choose, right, should always be a route that always gets to answering what the question asks you. Got this? Everybody? Sure? Okay, any doubts on this, guys, all of you all? Okay with the mistakes that you made and okay with how I'm, illustrating the kinds of mistakes that you can make? Perfect. Okay, so we're running short of time, so I'll just skip the next two questions. Go into phase 3. I've just pretty much made the points that I wanted to work with. Another point, another problem areas that people will share here. I'll cater to the questions towards the end. Okay, so whatever question you have, just keep it towards the end. So another problem people have is in this area, okay, of reading comprehension. So many of you all will ask me the same question of, what reading material do I use to improve my reading skills, this, that, and so on, right? Very straightforward answer to most of you all is you will not be able to change your reading speed or your reading style in the 2 or 3 month time frame that you have. What we would teach you through the online course and the classroom session is not to improve your reading speed, but to improve your grasping ability. What parts of the passage you need to hold on to and what parts of the passage you let go. For those of you who attended the RC sessions, you would realize that we follow something called a skimming and scanning kind of process, right? Where you get the gist of the passage and work with it. But one thing that I would definitely also recommend is for you to get exposed to those very in-depth articles on science, very in-depth articles on policies, very in-depth articles on say English literature. And for that I would recommend The Economist, The New Yorker, and The Atlantic. Very good articles that is written. And how I normally use these three whenever I read an article, right? And this is something which comes in terms of a faculty, being a faculty, right? I will always look for some sentence correction errors. Okay, as I read, I obviously understand what the passage is, but I always look for some sentence correction errors, and I'll always critically reason out what exactly the passage is telling me. Okay, and I would exactly do that for all of these three, because very good passages will expose you to what kinds of content you're going to expect on the reading comprehension section. And I would also recommend, personal recommendation of the Scientific American for harder science passages. Okay, science passages are going to be very dull and boring, so it's better for you to get exposed to them, right? Because what happens when you actually start reading comprehension passages, any passage which deals with something about the IT sector, I'm sure the IT guys will recollect a lot of things, right? But if the same IT person reads a a big passage about 1757 English literature of Annabelle, right, something of that sort, then you're gonna find it very very hard to comprehend. It's going to be very dry pieces of data that you're going to work with, right? So it's better for you to get exposed to these different types of passages. When I say harder science passages, you'll have topics varying from basic science to marine biology to microbiology to everything else. Okay, so when you're looking for harder science passages, please use the Scientific American. uh, you can register, you can buy those magazines, but I think you should be able to download some ebooks and PDFs of all of these. All right, so just make sure you use these extra resources for your reading comprehension bit. Yes, yes, it's the New Yorker magazine. I would say one article per day, right? See, I'm not. You can also use the Wall Street Journal, Ankur, no problem, right? But I'm giving you what I would recommend. I think any one out of the Economist, the New Yorker, the Atlantic, or the Wall Street Journal is absolutely fine, right? I'm a little partial toward the Atlantic, right, and the Economist, because it helps me on the economics aspect of things, because some of your critical reasoning questions will be based on your understanding of per capita GDP and so on, right? So I'm a little partial towards the Atlantic and Economist, and I know for a fact that the Scientific American was something that I used in my prep, so it's definitely helpful. Okay, you can definitely use the Wall Street Journal, no problem at all. Okay, now what do you do? What do you do in these articles, right? Obviously, that's the question that you're going to ask me, right? What do I do? I just read it or no? So these are the points that I would say is better for you to cover. Okay, so what do you do when you read any passage? The first thing you do, right, is you try to articulate. You read the passage paragraph by paragraph. Don't read the passage in depth. Okay, just scan. If you get scan through the passage, if you don't understand the meaning of a word or meaning of a sentence, let it go. Don't worry about the understanding of that. Just see if you can get a gist of the passage. Figure out what is the main point that the author is discussing in each of the paragraphs, right? And after you do that, figure out what the main idea of the entire article is. Okay, because one question type that you're always going to get on reading comprehension question is, what is the main purpose, what is the primary idea, and all of that, right? So this will help you figure that out. And what happens once you're exposed to more and more and more passages, right? You will get to a point where you'll realize that the main idea and the main point, the main idea especially, will be at specific points in the entire passage. Maybe in the first paragraph, first line, first paragraph, last line, second paragraph, first line. You can figure things out, right? You can get a general sense of things, of what parts of the passage that you need to hold on to, right? The second thing that I would ask you to work on is the language. You should understand the language. That's more important. Not understanding the meaning of a particular word there. When I speak about the understanding of language, is the understanding of the entire aspect of the reading comprehension passage. When I speak about language, I speak about content. What entire parts of the passage are giving you content, and what entire parts of the passage are actually passing a judgment. Content parts are like facts, historical information, say processes, categories of segregation, right? All of these would be content-based, data that the passage gives you. Now, why I'm asking you to hold on to this, because there will definitely be one content-based question in any passage. And the second is a judgment-based language that you need to hold on to, right? Something like opinions, when the author gives his opinion, when he gives a counterpoint, when he gives a comparison, when he gives a hypothesis, right? All of these would be him passing judgment. Now, what would the judgment help you out on? The judgment will help you out on figuring out what is the entire crux of this entire passage. And it also helps you on the third type, and I feel the most difficult type of an RC question, the most difficult question type of an RC question, and that would be an inference-based question. So the content bits, the language of the contents always help you on the content-based questions, and the judgment will always help you on the inference-based questions. Okay. So when you deal with content, right, what is content-based data? Like I mentioned, facts, historical information, right? Say some processes, categories of segregation, right? All of these would be content. And what would be judgment? When I give an opinion, right? When I give you an opinion, when I give you a counterpoint, right? When I give you a hypothesis, right? When I give you, say, a comparison between two things, right? All of these would be judgments. So look for content-based data, look for judgment-based data, and ideally your inference-based questions, your judgment-based data will help you solve it, and your content-based questions, the content-based data will help you solve it. And the last is always hold on to parts of the passage where there is a change in direction in terms of thoughts. For example, the author says, however, therefore, right? When you have transition words like this, right? That is a change in direction, right? Instead, right? All of these words basically means that there's a counterpoint that is coming about. There's a change in direction of thought. So you'll have to be very, very careful, and you have to hold on to these transition points. Okay, because most of your traps would lie based on this. If you forget the transition points, you'll fall for the traps in a reading comprehension question. So when you read any article, do these four things. Figure out the main point in each individual paragraph, the main point or main idea of the entire article. Look for language, split it into content-based language, judgment-based language, and look for changes in direction or changes in the direction of the source of thought, right? Look for those kinds of words. Got this? I think you'll get a little more detailed. Yes, obviously the tone of the passage, right? You'll get a little more detailed. I mean, I can't go into detail of an RC passage now, so more details will be there in your classroom sessions and your online sessions. But I'm just giving you a sense of what articles you use and how you need to make use of those articles. All right? Okay with this, guys? All of you all? Perfect. So coming to the last stage, what do you do in your last stage of prep? So I'm just going to summarize it this way, right? The first stage was for you to figure out what kind of test taker you are, right? Student A, student B, student C. The second is your first phase. The second is the second phase of prep where you actually decide what kind of study plan you require, right? So 2 months, 3 months, 1.5 months, you decide based on that. And your second phase of prep will involve you working through the entire course videos or the classroom curriculum and working the OG for homework. Take up a practice test after you finish the classroom curriculum or the online course and the OG homework. That would be checkpoint 1. Then start with the questions from the quant review and the verbal review in sets of questions and work it out in 60 minutes, 65 minutes, and take up another practice test. That would be checkpoint 2. Now, in your last phase of preparation, ideally the last 1 month after you finish the course videos, after you finished the OG verbal review and quant review, that's when you have to take what we give you as the advanced documents. Okay. Now, the advanced documents, you would have got it in an email from a marketing team. If you don't have it, you will definitely have a link to download it in your study plan. If you don't have the study plan, the advanced documents are already uploaded on your online portal for the online course. Okay. So one of these places you can download it. You'll have to make use of these advanced documents. So what does the advanced documents entail? It actually contains the retired GMAT questions and current GMAT questions. Now, when I say current GMAT, does not mean the ones in the GMAT that you're going to take up. It's the retired GMAT questions are questions retired almost 5 to 6 to 7 years back, right? And the current GMAT questions are the questions from the 2 free practice tests. That is test prep 1 and test prep 2. So what we have done is we've taken that test multiple times because it's a huge pool of 400 questions. And we've collated all of those questions and we've put it as a current GMAT prep, and all of them have explanations. So my advice to you is don't touch the current GMAT prep and don't touch it until you have finished the 2 free practice tests of the GMAT prep test. Okay, do not touch it otherwise. The retired GMAT prep, you can always work with it, and that's your last phase of prep. You take the retired GMAT questions. It's a set of around, I would say, 1,500 questions, around 800 and odd questions on verbal, and around 700 and odd questions on quant. Again, I would, and what we've done before I go further, what we've done is we've segregated the question based on topics. So under quant, you would have arithmetic, algebra, stats, and geometry. And for verbal, you would have sentence correction, critical reasoning, RC. So the reason we have done the segregation is because in this last phase of prep, you're going to do very specific kind of study, right? If you realize that on the quant front, the areas that you're lacking are areas like arithmetic number systems and geometry, right? You can focus on the advanced documents on those two topics. And if you feel on verbal that sentence correction is a problem, you can take up sentence correction questions. You can still solve the CR questions and RC questions side by side, right? So what normally I would recommend, or not normally what we would recommend, is you take the advanced documents and again you create a set of 31 questions in quant and 36 questions in verbal. How I would create a 31 question set in quant, I would keep it top heavy in terms of the topics that I'm weak at, and I would also put in some questions of the other topics as well, so that I still get practice on that. The same thing I would do on the verbal front. If I see that sentence correction I'm weak at, I would work out, instead of 12 questions, I would push it to 16 questions. Then use maybe 6 CR passages, 6 CR arguments, and around 4 RC passages. So you customize these advanced documents and you make sets and work it out in a time frame. Okay. And what you'll have to do also, ideally you would use these advanced documents on the weekdays. So on Monday, you would do one set of quant, one set of verbal. On Tuesday, you would do another set. On Wednesday, you would do another set. On Thursday, you would do another set. On Friday, you would do another set. Saturday, I would say keep it for a review process and a revision process. And Sunday, you would have to take up another practice test. So this cycle, right, this cycle of practicing sets of questions on the weekdays and taking a test on the weekend should continue as a cyclic process in your last 1 month. Got this? And that's where the test pack 1 and the test pack 2 come into play. So there are 2 free tests offered from the GMAT prep. There are also 4 paid tests. Okay. My advice is for you to definitely purchase it, because they are as close as you can get to the actual GMAT. I wouldn't use any other test other than the official test for a critical analysis. So it's, I think, a $90 investment. It makes sense to invest that amount of money for these 4 tests. I would take these 4 tests, and I would take these 4 tests on every weekend in the last 1 month of my prep. Okay. So that's your last phase 3. And remember, whatever test you take, always do an in-depth analysis for it. And this is where, for those who enrolled for the Mission 2019 MBA, we come into the picture. We would actually sit with you, give you a way forward based on your practice test scores. You can actually review your practice test with us, right? We give you some advice. So your mentor will be that touch point of sorts for all your doubts. Got it? So that's your last phase of prep. Got this? So that brings me to the AWA and the IR bit. So some people had this question also about what do I do for AW and IR. You ideally don't need to worry about these 2 sections until the last month of your prep. Okay, because what is tested on AW and IR is concepts that have been dealt with in CR, RC, and in quant. Your arguments that you learn in CR will help you for AWA, and your statistics that you learned on quant, geometry on quant, and CR and RC will help you in the IR section. The only thing extra you'll have to do is you'll have to learn how to analyze graphs. Okay, data interpretation is something you'll have to get accustomed to. So what we have done is we have we have 2 YouTube videos. Again, the link to this is in your study plan. You can find it there. It's also up as an online course in your online module, so you can check it there too. We also upload on YouTube, so wherever you want, you can have a look at these videos. It's around a 45-minute video for both. On the AWA video, we speak about how to break down an argument, how to draft the essay, give you like a structure to follow. I'll give you an example of an essay too. And on IR, what we do is we speak about the format of the IR section, the question types that you have on IR, and we focus on for each of the question types you have, we take an example, and we also give you some data on how to analyze graphs. Okay, so that's again a 45 to 50-minute video based on that. So these 2 you'll have to only worry about towards the end of your preparation. Okay, and the best thing to do when you're taking up the practice test in the last 1 month is to never skip the AWA and the IR section. Okay, because the best source of practice for IR would always be from the prep software. Okay, so just the prep test basically. So just make sure you don't skip these sections, because it helps you, at least when you take up these two sections, helps you sit for an entire duration of 3 hours 30 minutes, right? So it develops your mental stamina. um, and finally, so like I said, no, uh, and this is specifically for the people in the last phase of prep, and this is what I suggest for people who are at a quant 49, right? Or maybe a verbal, say 38. This is when I would recommend that you work with this. I would definitely want you to take a shot at this advanced GMAT quant from Manhattan GMAT. Okay, it's a very, very, very good set of 150 questions, but the added rider here is it's not an official question. Keep that in mind. But they are questions that I would definitely rate at a 700 to 750 levels. Okay. You only go to those types of questions only if you're at a 40, 48, 49 on quant, you're looking at pushing to a 50 or a 51. Right. And the other option that you have is another official resource. Only use it if you've exhausted all the other official resources, and that's a GMAT question pack. Okay, so it's a set of 404 questions that you can purchase again on the mba.com website. We don't recommend you purchase it. The only time we would ask anybody to purchase that is when they've exhausted everything, or normally retakers come to us with all the types of questions exhausted. So this is where we give them the additional pieces of additional pieces of material to work with. Okay, so I would say, don't, for those of you all who are starting your prep, don't go and take up this book and look at the harder questions, because I told you the only way you would get to the harder questions is if you get the easy, medium, and the medium hard right. So if you'll not see these types of questions if you're not at a 49 level at all. So make sure you get to a 49 and then look at all of these resources. Okay, so that brings me to the end of this webinar that I wanted to add. I mean, I had a couple of questions also that I wanted to discuss, but I think the general gist of what I wanted to say is given out there. So I'm going to keep a quick 10-minute Q&A round. See, just keep your questions more specific to prep, right? Don't ask me things of H1B, because that requires a more detailed discussion. I cannot answer it to you in 1 line or 2 lines, right? So any questions specific to prep, I'm pretty okay to answer. See, for those some of you all have this thing about extracurriculars, right? See, I am of the opinion that you cannot do anything drastic to your profile in the next 3 months. Okay, so you cannot do anything drastic, but you can always build on the extracurriculars aspect. So something like, if you're getting into product and operations, then I would look at maybe looking at a black belt at Six Sigma, right? Or a green belt at Six Sigma. If I'm looking at HR or looking at marketing, then maybe something like Toastmasters, public speaking would make sense. If you're a travel, if you're a person who travels a lot, then maybe I would start writing a blog, something like a travelogue, right? To maintain a travelogue of sorts. Travelogue is basically a blog maintained by people who travel a lot, right? So maintain a travelogue, publish it, right? Ask people to read it. So things like that is what I would add, and that again depends upon what field of MBA you're going into. Okay, so I've got verbal 31 and quant 30-45. Okay, on the first mark. I think that's fine, Upasna. I don't think that's too much of a problem. I think you fall under a type 2 type of student, so it's better for you to directly start with the quant and verbal courses, right? I don't think that's I would say 45 and 31. If you're not a retaker and you've started with that as the mock score, is a very, very good mock score. Okay, done by BDS and have zero experience as of now. Will this be good for my MBA profile in college? Again, that becomes more of a very detailed discussion I have to have. I'll need to know a lot more things about you to give you like an answer on it, right? So it's better for you to ask these questions and have like a detailed 20-minute discussion with your application mentor. Okay, so that's what I would say. How about music? I'm a violinist. uh See, Naveen, you need to understand two things. Okay, when I speak about extracurriculars, I mean extracurriculars. I don't mean hobbies. I don't mean pastimes. Okay. So if you're a violinist who just practices the violin, but you've not actually, gone and on a public platform done something, then that wouldn't be an extracurricular. You can put it as an add-on, definitely, right? So how has being a violinist, other than giving you self-gratification, helped? Have you taken part in something? All of those you'll have to build on, right? If you have that, then that would count as an extracurricular. Because some people also write, what are my extracurriculars? I play cricket. Now that's a hobby, right? I mean, that's a pastime that you have. That's not an extracurricular. An extracurricular is something you pursue in addition to your full-time job that you have. Yes, Arnab, I don't think you should prepare for GMAT and GRE simultaneously. Okay, because the question types on the GRE are different. You have data interpretation as a major chunk on GRE, and you'll have to learn vocabulary. The GRE is more vocabulary based test, so I don't think it's a good idea to do both. My suggestion is to sit and make a decision of what to take between the two. If you're undecided, I would say take up a practice test for GRE, take up a practice test for GMAT, see which one you were more comfortable with, and then make your decision. Yes, I think a 6-day study plan with 2 hours work per day should be absolutely fine, Rahul. So, I mean, how you customize it is left up to you, as long as you're able to put 2 hours of work per day. Yeah, it's okay to do it in sequence, Sharia, no problem. When I say 17 PS and 14 DS, just do it in sequence. Towards the end, no, you'll get harder questions, so things will, be a little better for you there. So just go with the flow. Don't worry about the difficulty levels at all. Lubna, I addressed that before. I said around 2.5 hours of work you'll have to put in daily, right? So that would be the better alternate. And on the weekends, maybe you can put in some more time. No, Pushkar, that's a very say question you're asking me. Can I score good in the actual GMAT, right? I mean, I don't know, right? It depends upon where you start. See, you need to understand one thing, right? You never critically analyze your diagnostic score, right? Everybody starts off from one point, everybody reaches another, right? So you'll need to understand that even though the diagnostic score was low, you're looking at it in terms of it being low, right? You're not looking at it in terms of what should I do to boost that up. You're looking at the glass being half empty. I'm looking at it being half full, right? You've taken the first step, so it's better for you to figure out what needs to be done. Like I said, if you got a low diagnostic score, it's better for you to phase out your prep into 4 months or 5 months, where you focus on the basics first, and after you get done with the basics, that's when you start with the actual course. Okay, so ideally you should have got done with the basics, because you identified that that's a big problem for you. Yes, awards in professional life would add to applications, right? Definitely, yes. Ankur, nailed it, missed it was something we used almost 2-3 years back. Okay, we don't use it anymore. So we give you a separate error log. So if the one which is mapped to the 2018 edition and the 2019 edition is the one I would, recommend that you use. So what the thought process then was, nailed it is something that, I don't have to review. I know that's the answer. I know what I did was exactly right. Missed it was something that I came up to the last stage. For example, a question that asks you what is the value of x minus y, but you find the value of x and you answer x itself. That would be a missed it. Okay, screwed it would be basically something that I did not understand itself, right? And I have absolutely no clue of how to work with it. Okay, so that's how we segregated things into nailed it, missed it, screwed it, and so on. But we don't use that anymore, right? So what you're using, I think, is something which is mapped to the 2015 2016 one. I would recommend you use it 2018 2019. I have been a finalist in Femina Miss India and represented my state nationally twice. Currently working for Cognizant. Do you think this experience of mine in modeling counts as extra? Definitely yes, Ankita. I would definitely add this as a big thing about the profile, right? Because it gives you that extra, say, chutzpah of sorts, right? So I think it's good. I think it's a good thing, good point also you can give. And you're working for Cognizant also, right? So it's a very diverse thing that you're doing there. I would definitely, leverage this option that I have. Okay. So just definitely mention it in your essay. Don't worry about TOEFL at all. Anybody preparing for the GMAT should directly be able to prepare for the TOEFL, because two sections of the TOEFL, there are four sections in the TOEFL and IELTS: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Your reading and your writing is taken care of with your preparation on GMAT itself. It's just the writing, it's just the speaking and the listening is what you'll have to work with, right? So I don't think I've never seen any GMAT student, preparing for TOEFL separately. So I think after you finish your GMAT, maybe in a week time or 10 days, you can directly take the TOEFL. 4 years of work experience not enough for a master's course like IMA. Uh, Ideally, see, if you're looking at so when you say master's course, looking at an MBA course, if you're speaking about an MBA course, then a 4-year work experience, I don't think would cut it, because some of them have a cutoff of 5 years. Okay. Master's course, I think you can apply anywhere, irrespective of what experience you have. Yes, I meant doing 17 PS together and 14 DS together, Shariar. Okay. So I said make a set of 31, right? So it's better for you to work it out that way for. So it's just take it. It's just like the official guide. No, the quant review is actually segregated into problem solving and data sufficiency. So you can take questions 1 to 17 from PS and 1 to 14 from DS, and you can work. Next, you can start from 18 to 35, and then you can start from 15 to say 27. How many marks will I go for the main exam means it's fluctuating. No, that depends upon what your score of the mark is, Upasana. There will always be the last 4 marks are key. Whatever you get in your last mark or your second last mark, right? Minus 20 points is what you'll actually get on test day. So if you end up getting like a 680 on your practice test, you end up with a 660 or a 650 on your actual test. Okay. Ideally, the rule of thumb is minus 20 points from your official practice tests. See, don't worry about analyzing of practice tests now. Okay. I think what you'll have to worry about now is get your concepts in place. Okay, so that is key. I think get that done. When you say quant is fine, right? You need to understand that if you treat quant as a little overconfident, you're going to mess up. And Karthik, you messed up on a couple of questions. I saw your answers there, right? You answered D for a question, which you're not supposed to make. Quant, when you say quant is fine, it depends upon putting a number on it, right? So just make sure you focus on both. I don't think you need to worry about the tests at this point. Right? Anybody asking about tests now, I would just say just focus on your prep. Yeah, marathon or split technique of SC is a strategy that is there, but not all questions will only work with that, Ankur. You'll need to understand that. Okay, most of the questions nowadays test you both on grammar as well as the meaning, right? So you'll have to also understand the in-depth meaning, and not always will they give you a question with a 3-2 split. Okay, it doesn't work like that anymore. Okay, ISB anything in the range of 700 should be okay. So what do you mean by without any work experience but a great profile? When I don't understand that. Okay, without any work experience but a great profile means what? I mean, you studied in an institution which is way, I mean, beyond something like Hogwarts or something. I mean your profile is dependent on your work experience, right? So that's what. So can you expand on that, please? Shika, I wouldn't go into Power Score and Aristotle for now. Okay, I mean, you want to go through a 300 page book for CR? I don't think that's necessary. Stick to what we have for now, right? If you feel that later on you need to, maybe enhance your understanding of concepts, and maybe you can chop and choose topics that you want to work with there. I wouldn't go for a 300-page book on CR, right? And learn. I mean, CR is more about common sense. It's not about concepts, right? So you'll have to get accustomed to how to critically analyze. See, many people have different ways of working. Okay, I mean, ideally, I feel CR. It's what you read is one thing, but what you apply will be based on common sense. So it's better for you to stick to what we have. Anything later you want to do some in-depth preparation of particular topics, use whatever you have or the other resources you have, please. Got 47. Verbal 28. I would say Shivam, 2 months should do for you. Okay, I would look at pushing the verbal score to something like a 38, 40, 38, I would say, and quant, I would push it to a 50 because that clearly is a strong point. So something like a 50 and anything beyond the 36 on verbal is what I would look at. And I think 2 months should absolutely be fine. Yeah, I think April is also a very, very good date that you've picked. You always give yourself 2 to 3 months of time. No, your 12th board marks are not too much of a criteria. Okay, so but the problem is if you have a slightly lesser percentage, it is always better for you to improve your improve your overall GMAT score, right? Because you can justify at least saying that in 12th I didn't do this, but here on the GMAT I have a 720. So they will overlook the lower degree marks than the 12th marks if your GMAT score is pretty high. Do we have mock tests? Okay, 1 minute. So, do we have mock tests for Crackverbal in online course? Yes, Shashwat, you do have mock tests. We give you 5 mock tests, and that would be from the 800 score test. But again, I would use the test only for practice, not for a critical analysis. I would only use the official GMAT preps for critical analysis. So even though we give you the 5 tests, I would still recommend that you purchase the 4 paid tests and work with it. Pooja, it's OG 2018 questions. Video explanations are not there. We do have 2017 questions for quant. But the thing is, I mean, it doesn't make sense for us to sit and record solutions to it when the OG questions is going on revising every year, right? So what we do as an alternative is you can search for the questions on our forum. So instead of shooting a video on those questions, we have a discussion forum on the Crackverbal forum, or all you have to do is take the first 4 words of the question, put it on Google, click Crackverbal, you'll get a forum link to that question, and you will see a discussion thread that is opened by a student, and it'll always be closed by a faculty. Okay, so there'll be a lot of discussion there. So any of your questions, any of your queries can be answered using that procedure. Yeah, I think for Haas, I would ideally keep a 710 Sriram, 710, 720. If you're getting something like 720, right, 730, I would go ahead and book the test date. Okay, if you're looking at 700, I think that should give you a pretty decent shot at Haas. Karthik, so if you got a 50 on quant, right, then I don't think you have too many problems. I would still look at not making silly errors, because if you drop from a 50 to 49, that means you have to improve your verbal score by 2 points to get back to the same level. Okay, so I would say April is fine. I think verbal requires the more time. So I would only take the 2-month verbal study plan, and I would work with the 2-month verbal study plan. But side by side, I would work with the quant practice aspect of things. No, Ashwin. Unfortunately, I mean, I don't want to, be very critical, but being part of social clubs, having a good score, I think most of the IT profile people will have that. Okay, you'll have people from BITS, you'll have people from IT, all of that, right? So everybody would have approximately the same profile that way in terms of graduation. What you do in your graduation percentages and what you do as as a student, say entrepreneur or a student ambassador, right, is not counted as much as what you do in your actual workplace. Okay, so for example, if you actually say been a part of the CSR initiative of your company for a good part of 2 years, you've actually done a lot of help there, and help you out. Maybe some people go into Teach for India, right? They get a say fellowship of Teach for India, and they work there for 2 years. I think that's something that looks at a profile. Your score in your 10th and 12th, nobody is worried. The MBA college is not worried. Valuable position in social clubs, nobody's worried too much, right? It's about your work that is more important. Yes, a mechanical stream, you'll have a better option. So see the profiles which are out of the box, something like somebody mentioned they were from Navy, right? So I think that is something which is a very, very, very good, strong profile. So a person with a really good profile, doesn't need to score like a 730, 740, right? He can afford like a 680 because his profile will take care of the other thing. And if you're from mechanical, or if you're, one more very, very good profile is people from the oil and gas industry. So people from oil and gas know very good profile. So they also require something like a 680, 690, that their profile will take care of the other things, right? So if your profile is just, slightly different from an IT profile, you have a pretty good GMAT score of 710, that will be an added factor in your application. Okay. So it's like, you're going to be selected from a pool which is much more smaller than the IT pool that is out there. What do I do? So Sriram, I'll need data on that. So what I would suggest, maybe if you can, schedule a call with one of the faculty, sit and analyze the questions and see where you're making mistakes, maybe then we can give you some advice on that. So I would recommend that you send in an email to prep@Crackverbal, and one of us would get in touch with you. Sriram, I wouldn't look at a part-time MBA at any of the colleges, right? If you have an option of a full-time, do it, or you shift track to a 1-year MBA. That would be a better option for you, right? Part-time MBA, I don't even think you'll need to go through. In some of the colleges, you'll not even have to go through the entire GMAT process of sorts. Yes, yes. Public sector units are very, very good profiles. Okay, so ideally, the thing is, if you have a good GMAT score, I think you stand a very, very good chance. Yes, see how you use the study plan is left up to you. If you're able to put 6 to 8 hours of work per day, and you're not working, right, then you can crunch the entire 3 months or 4 months to 2 months. That you can do, Harshita. I mean, I'm assuming that you can figure that out yourself, right? So instead of phasing it out for 4 months, you can put everything, you can divide everything by two and wrap it up in 2 months, right? So that customization, I leave it up to you. Upasana, again, you're getting into details, right? It depends upon an opinion that people have, right? If you ask me, I'm of the opinion that the MBA abroad is much more valuable than an MBA in India, because there the diversity is more. You will get to learn with, you'll get to, you get to share, say, share the class and your thought processes with very, very diverse set of people. But in India, right, what happens with the IIMs, not ISB I think is a very good option. They stand for diversity, but especially in the IIMs, you'll have people from the same background. You'll have IIT grads, BITS Pilani, this, that, and all, right? So you'll have people of the same mentality, so you don't get to learn more. But that's not to say that they are not good, right? It depends upon the perspective that you look at. So on the flip side, in the Indian colleges, there is placement assistance. That is one thing that is very important. In US colleges, you are next to zero places placement assistance, right? Especially except for the Ivy Leagues. So you have to network when you go to the US or the other countries. It's not a given that you're going to get an internship or a job there. So there are other factors that you'll have to take care of if you go to the US, right? But if you look at India, you have that placement assistance, right? You have colleges will push you towards things, and it's much more cheaper proposition also, right? You have like 30 to 35 lakhs. You can wrap things up. Okay. Okay. All right. So okay, Sriram, I understood what you said. So don't want to miss out on the income I got right now. Okay. Now I think see, if you ask me my opinion, right, I think I would do a 1 year, right? I would do a 1 year maybe. But the problem is in the US, no, the very few colleges offer you a 1 year course, right? If you're looking at 1 year, you'll have to look at Europe as an option. Not exactly, Karthik. I mean, I told you, right? Anything what you do in your, 10th and 12th has not too much of implications on your actual application, right? I think the startup point that you mentioned, that would be much more added. I would say a 100 times, 100x better factor than the fact that you're from BITS Pilani, right? Harshita, I think that's a question that you should ask your admissions expert, right? Because you have University of Melbourne, which has a 670 cutoff and so on. You have a lot of options there, but again, it depends upon what stream you're looking at. So you have to get into in depth on why you're choosing Australia as an option. Okay, so it's better you have a word with that the application mentor there. If you're looking at an MS in business analytics, I wouldn't have gone the GMAT route. I would have directly gone the GRE route. So whoever posted this, I'm not trying to make it change track, but I would look at taking the GRE and getting done with things, right? You have an option there. See, Plavan, anything which is technical MBA, right, or anything which has technology oriented topics, no, business analytics. I know where you're coming from there, right? I think it's better for you to take the GRE and score a really high, 333. Because if I'm looking at MS in business analytics, I would look at it in maybe a Harvard, or more importantly MIT. Okay, maybe Sloan, and I would look at MIT as an option because that's the best, that's the cream of the crop there, right? So I would look at going through the GRE route. So just contemplate that, right? Maybe it helps you later. Yes, undergrad doesn't matter much compared to work, Karthik. Yeah, there are colleges other than ISB. IM, A, B, C, K, L, all accept the GMAT for the 1-year courses. They call it, I think, the PGPX program and the EPGP programs. You also have other colleges like XLRI, which offer the, take the GMAT for the 1-year general MBA course. Then you have Great Lakes Chennai, you have SV Jain, you have Narsimonji, all of these accepts. Yeah. MIT would accept only GMAT Plavan. If you're looking at MIT, then they are very specific. But I think the other colleges, which you're looking. So one thing I would do, right, if I were you, Plavan, is I would look at the different options that I have. Okay, for an MS in business analytics, because MIT, no, I would classify that as a dream college. Okay, because you'll need to be very good, okay, to get to that, and it's not a given that you would get in. So I would keep that as a dream college, work towards it, but I would look at the other options as well, right? If the other options, all of them accept the GRE, then it's better for me to go to the GRE route. Yes, SPJN also has a 1-year pro. SPJN, yeah, they have different exams, they have different programs, Ankita. So some of them accept they have their some of them accept the CAT. So you have a CAT program, that would be a two year program. They have a global program. So they have a lot of programs. Okay, I mean the global program I wouldn't recommend. See, if you're looking at SPJN, say Great Lakes and Narsimonji, that would be tier 2 colleges in India. Tier 1 colleges would be XLRI, ISB, and IAMs. Okay, I am ABC when I say tier 1. So tier 2 colleges I wouldn't look at because the return on investment wouldn't be that great. Yeah, you can always send us an email at prep@Crackverbal, Karthik. So that should be fine. Okay, guys. So I think we've actually gone beyond the time that is decided. So anyway, we'll wrap things up now. So I told you, right? Most of you have problems. I mean, have questions on your profile as such. So your application mentor should be able to manage that better. Maybe if you guys have taken the classroom program, you come down to Koramangala, you can actually have a word with me when you catch me, free sometimes. Okay. So I'll wrap things up now. Good night. Take care. Hope to see you in class, or hope to connect with you over an email. All right. See you. Bye.